Hi everyone and welcome to the latest episode of 10 Minutes With. Now this week we join Alex in conversation with her husband, who just so happens to work for the National Archive. From the Domesday Book in 1086 to the Great Fire of London in 1666. This is 10 Minutes with Lee Oliver from the National Archive.
Hi guys, it's Alex here. I'm sitting here with my hubby Lee Oliver, for our 10 Minutes With. Lee works at the National Archives in Kew, and many of you might have heard of it or might not. So what we're going to do today is talk to Lee about the National Archives and find out a little bit more about it. So hello Lee.
Hello.
In the background you might hear the rain. At the moment obviously it's absolutely chucking down, and we've got dogs in the house, so if you hear them bark, don't worry. So Lee, let's start with what do you do at the archives? What's your kind of job?
What's my job? So my job title is Head of Visitor Experience. Mm-hmm. So my job is to make sure that everyone that comes to the archives as a visitor, which is basically anyone that comes in except for the staff, mm-hmm. has the best experience possible while they're there. I have a small team with two roles. One is front of house. I don't manage all the front of house people that you might meet if you went there, but the people you meet at the front door and roaming around the building, they work in my team. And I also manage the large meeting spaces, like our auditorium. So I have a team that look after that, and we provide the audiovisual support and the booking support and the technical support. And I also have a team that looks after all the complaints and formal feedback we get from our visitors.
Lovely. Complaints sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
We've talked about your role there, but what actually is the National Archives? What kind of building is it? What's its function? And what does it provide to the public?
Okay, so the National Archives is actually a conglomerate of a number of different former government departments, agencies, functions that have gradually come together over the years. So we are an archive, mm-hmm. which means we collect and maintain, we hold records of government, but we are also the Historic Manuscripts Commissioner, which means we have responsibility for important records that are held in private hands.
Okay.
And we are also responsible for, people may have heard of HMSO a long time ago, Her Majesty's Stationery Office. That doesn't exist as a body anymore, but what's left of it is part of us. And mainly, we are responsible for something called Gazettes Online and legislation.gov.uk. So we are the publisher of all government information and legislation.
Okay.
We don't write the legislation, we just publish it and maintain the website with the support of contractors.
Okay.
So it's lots of different things.
I know I'm a bit blonde about these things, and you've already wowed me with science there, but I know that people go there for historical documents. So for example, I know that you've got the birth, marriages and death certificates there, so people need a new birth certificate or a copy of a marriage certificate and things like that. That's possibly where they go. And also you have very important documents there, sort of, for example, Henry VIII's stuff about Henry VIII or Richard III, or sort of that sort of royal history, or you've got a copy of the Magna Carta there and things like that. So obviously there's a lot of people that go for research there, for their own sort of looking at their family tree and things like that, but also if they're writing a book.
Yes.
So I've sort of thrown a lot in there into that question, but what kind of...
Okay, so the other bit, we used to be called the Public Record Office, so people may have heard of that, which started out in Chancery Lane in central London, mm-hmm. And I worked there for a little bit in the 90s, but we're now based at Kew in southwest London, where we've been since the 1970s. Mm-hmm. So we are the archive of government, so it's records created by government departments, the central law courts, that are deemed worthy of permanent preservation. So not everything gets kept. If you kept every bit of paper that government had created, it would just be vast and massive. So it has to be selected. But we do have lots of important and iconic things. So there's about 200 shelf kilometres of records.
Wow, okay.
Yes, in our building at Kew, and also partly stored in a salt mine in Cheshire, because we don't have enough room for everything.
Wow.
And we don't just have bits of paper, although there is lots of paper. A lot of the old documents are written on parchment, which is animal skin that's been treated, so it behaves like paper. We've also got photographs, we've got microfilms, we've got videos, we've got some very interesting objects that have come along the way. Things like locks of hair and false teeth and shriveled up lemons. And most importantly, we have a mummified rat.
Oh yeah, I've heard about the mummified rat. I've actually seen the mummified rat, and I know the story behind this. So
the mummified rat is really important. So in the 1830s, a number of worthy people were quite concerned at the state of the court records in central London. They were housed in very unsuitable buildings, in Westminster Abbey and a number of buildings in the city and elsewhere, and they weren't properly looked after.
Okay.
And a record commission was formed to go and investigate this.
Yeah.
And they opened up these sacks of records, and in one of the sacks they found a mummified rat. And the mummified rat was taken to Parliament and shown to Parliament to say something must be done.
Right.
And as a result of that, the Public Record Act was passed in 1858, I think it was, which was the first one, which then started the beginnings of
looking after the
records and the creation of the Public Record Office that was then built in Chancery Lane, and gradually bringing the records out of all these unsuitable locations and looking after and actually creating the discipline of record keeping and archiving and all the rest of it. So the mummified rat is really important.
Well, that's interesting you say about the whole thing looking after records. I know the building is built right next door to the River Thames, and it's always been my concern. Well, how can you keep the records dry? You know, is that building actually flood? You know, there's a prevention for flood.
There is prevention. So moving the archives to Kew in the 1970s was controversial. They couldn't stay in Chancery Lane. The records had massively outgrown the amount of space available, and they couldn't make Chancery Lane any bigger. So they had to look for another site, and one of the sites they looked at first was a little place called Bletchley Village.
Yeah, in Bletchley Park.
Well, no, what is now called Milton Keynes.
Oh my goodness! Okay.
Yes, but it was decided that it was too far from London, and the transport links were not good enough. So they decided not to. They said it has to be nearer to London. So they actually looked at two potential sites, one at Kew and one at Enfield. Both of them were because they were government-owned land. So Enfield was the old armaments factories where the rifles were made.
Yeah.
And Kew had been a government site for most of the century. And they both had pros and cons in terms of how close they were to London, their transport links, proximity to water, because Enfield you've got canals and things as well. So they settled on Kew. And yes, it is within view of the River Thames.
Yeah.
So they did studies. They already knew at the time that they were going to be building the Thames Barrier, which provided more flood protection. Okay. So the building is actually raised up, although it's not so obvious now as it used to be because the way it's been landscaped. You're actually walking uphill to go into the building, and most of the records are further up in the building. Okay. So it was built at a height that is a 1 in 1,000 flood risk, which means once in 1,000 years.
Okay.
Oh, that might change with climate change. But it's still So the archives are raised up, and there's lots of protection for them, and it's in a proper purpose-built, two purpose-built buildings.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so you've talked about people who come and visit the archives, and I know you've got quite a heavy footprint of people, all sorts of different people that come in. So obviously I know the people that go in, they're researching their family tree, or they're looking at a family member's war record, all those sort of things. But, do you have other do people like you, schools or general public, are there people that come in for, I go in there for a cup of tea, because I know you've got a little lovely cafe there, and you've got a really great exhibition that you change. You've done you're just doing the 20s, and I know this autumn it's going to be about treason, which I'm really looking forward to. Going to have a look at the bits and pieces there. But do you do like school parties, and do people just come in for general things? You've got a shop, they buy books and items from. Okay,
so years ago you would only have come to public record office to look at the archive collections. There wasn't much else. It was reading rooms, and you went in, you looked at the documents. A lot of the popular material is now online on things like Ancestry and Find My Past and our own website.
Sure.
So a lot of that kind of demand changed. So we have shifted to encourage people to come to the archives who aren't necessarily going to be in the reading rooms, but there's still something for them in the archives. So yes, we do have a lovely shop, and we do have a nice cafe, and we do put on more and more events and exhibitions so that people can engage with the archives without necessarily being sat in a reading room just looking at a document on their own. So we're there to help expose the collections, but it's a very broad to a right variety of audiences. So yeah, the general public can come in, and we have lots of schools coming in. So we really pioneered using what they call primary sources, so the actual archival records, right the way down to primary school children.
Oh, brilliant!
Which previously you wouldn't look at archives until you're doing your PhD.
Sure.
They didn't even use them at degree level. Whereas now because the idea is get them young.
Yeah, get them interested, get them to see the real thing.
Exactly. And also it helps because in teaching history it's not just about dates and people, but it's also about but it's also about the evidence.
Yeah.
How do we know that what we're being taught happened? And years ago you would just talk, well, your teacher told you that was it, or it's in a history book, but
to actually see it,
and make up your own mind, so we can present the primary evidence. And one of my favourites is a session we do for 7 and 8 year olds, I think it is, roughly that, certainly primary school, because they all do the Great Fire of London as part of the curriculum.
I know that one.
The curriculum. So they come down and do a session with us about the Great Fire of London, and at the beginning we start off and we say to the children, well, where did the Great Fire of London start? And of course a hand goes up and they say Pudding Lane. And then you say to them, well, how do you know? Say, well, our teacher told us. And you say, well, how do they know? Were they there? And somebody else, they scratch their head a bit and think, well, my teacher's ancient, but maybe not that ancient. So they're like, oh, they're a bit. So then we get out the hearth tax roll for Pudding Lane for the year of the fire in 1666, and there on the hearth tax roll is Thomas Fariner paying tax on its hearths, because of course he was a baker, so he had hearths. And there is the proof that Thomas Fariner was a real person living in Pudding Lane
and
in that year, and he was a baker. And there you go. So it's like, yes, so he really did exist. He really was there. So taking it right back, getting the youngest people to appreciate that there's
the visual evidence.
There's actually this is it, and it's from the time. It wasn't written after. The hearth tax records are from that time.
Sure.
It's not someone looking back and making it up. It's there. So we have all those things. Going right back to Domesday Book, which is the first public record.
Yes. Domesday
1086. 1086. Yes.
So all these documents that you've seen and witnessed and seen go through, and obviously I know that you do events where things are put on display, documents put on display. What would be it's hard to say your favourite document, but what is one that struck you the most out of things that I know that you've seen?
Really hard, because I have seen a lot of documents over my years there, and there are millions of them. And of course, I've not seen all of them.
I know you started out as things like Jack the Ripper, letters and photos, Japanese war camps.
All those
when I
was microfilming, I did indeed see. So yes, I have handled Jack the Ripper letters.
But then I've seen things like the Mary Queen of Scots things that Charles the First's
so we don't
trial.
We don't have his death warrant. That's
but you have the answers about his trial records. Yeah. So what would you say out of all those things you see? Could you pinpoint one or two?
That's really, really hard. So if you're thinking impressive, then there's the iconic things like we do have a copy of Magna Carta. Sure. Not the oldest one, but probably one of the best preserved early Magna Carta. We have the papal bull that made Henry VIII Defender of the Faith. That has a seal on it that's big, and it's encased in a golden casket.
Wow.
The seal is in a golden case. So you've got iconic things like that.
Yeah.
And then you've got really mundane things. One of my favourites, which is probably quite topical, is correspondence with Margaret Thatcher when she became Prime Minister, and she moved into the flat at number 10, which was quite a modest affair then. And she insisted that she was paying for her own ironing board.
Oh my word.
She was not going to put that on
And
the
this is a
taxpayer.
document in your...
Yes, and we have this correspondence where she was saying, no, I am not claiming for Arnie Board, I can provide my own.
So
little
there
things
was
like
one
that.
Tory that was actually paying for something
absolutely.
herself.
It kind of set the time.
Sorry, don't mean to be political.
But it is. But the thing is, that's evidence, and that people can read that and go. So it does give you a flavour of that person.
Sure,
and that's the power of the records. And then we've got records of ordinary people.
Yeah.
So like you say, you mentioned people researching their family
histories.
histories.
I was watching a programme last night about the smog of 52.
Yes.
And obviously you have records of a doctor who when the police broke into houses, they were finding this person by this name and this person by that name, and so those people obviously are ordinary people, but they're part of our history, part of that thing that we have to learn about, because obviously environmentally we learnt quite a lot from that last smog that we had back in the 50s, and that obviously we don't have coal fires in London anymore, we don't, all those sort of things have come about because of that, because of ordinary people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I know that you do really brilliant talks and events at the archives, and I've been to loads of historical events and seen really important historical documents, and spoken to historians that you see on the telly, things like that, and it's really quite interesting. You learn quite a lot. You learn more about a subject you're interested in. And I know that you help manage those talks and events. So out of that, I know you have a lot of people. We've had Lucy Worsley there, Susanna Lipscomb, Dan Jones, all those sort of historical people, who are writing historical books and are on TV. But who would you say was kind of your or that made your heart go, oh, that person's in the building? And because I know you're not a fan, you don't do fandom stuff, so what person do you think came in that you thought that was a brilliant talk by someone I wouldn't have thought is quite an important talk, and you were able to witness?
So that's really hard. So at one end of the spectrum, Sir Michael Palin.
Wow, yes.
Yeah, he was brilliant, and I was house manager for that talk. It was a very, very hot summer's evening.
Because he spoke on the Pole to Pole, didn't he, from about 20 years ago or something? And
he did. It was linked to our Cold War exhibition. We were looking back to the Cold War, and he came and spoke about going to countries that were then behind the Iron Curtain, going to Russia. And he was a brilliant speaker, and
very humble man as well.
Very humble, very significant, because it was actually the week he'd announced he was cancelling his speaking tour because he had to have a heart operation.
Wow.
But he kept his appointment with us, came to us, and I was with him backstage, and he was just very relaxed, making us laugh. It was very nice. So one end you've got that, and then the other end, it's getting harder and harder now, but every year, up until the pandemic, for World Holocaust Day, we've had talks from Holocaust survivors, who are now, of course, extremely aged.
Yes.
And so they're different different significance, different impact, but just as important.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Wow.
Along with, as you say, all those famous TV historians, and
any royalty come into you?
Have royalty? Yes, a royalty have been in. So the building was opened by the Queen in 1978.
Right, okay.
So royalty have visited the archives. Prince Charles came. No, this was about 2003. And it was the last formal gathering of First World War veterans. Right. And he came, and we had it, and we got some records out. And one thing we got out was his uncle's service record.
Mountbatten.
We had Mountbatten's naval service record, and we got that out for him. And that was it. He didn't want to leave. And his equerry was kind of tugging his elbow, saying, "So we need to leave." And he's like, "No, wow. I want to read this." And so he stayed. And again, the power of the archives.
Yes,
the archives that held his attention,
absolutely.
Having seen all these people. We have had royalty, and we've had former prime ministers and other people like that, famous people that come in to research in the archives, who normally come in incognito, don't want to make a fuss, and we respect that.
Absolutely,
we might engage with them because we might want to have them come in and do a talk or something about what they're doing, but in terms of going in the reading rooms doing their research, they're just another reader doing their research.
Well, we've run completely over time. We've actually nearly done double, so we've nearly done 20 minutes at the end of this talk, there might be someone who might be interested in doing their family tree or going to see records, and can I go and have a look at things like that. So what would they do? Would they come and arrive at the archives and just have a look at there, or would they become I know they become readers, so you get readers tickets so you can come and look at things for your study, or so is there a website that they can look at? Would you be able to give us the website name?
So I would say definitely start by going to our website, which is nationalarchives.gov.uk.
Yeah.
We also have a very active presence on social media, in particular Twitter, but also TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things online.
If you put in the National Archives,
you will find it.
You will find that. Yeah.
Just make sure you're looking at the National Archives for the United Kingdom and not another country, because lots of countries have national archives, and we often get mixed up, particularly with the Americans.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Lee, thank you so much.
Thank you
for chatting to us. We have literally done more than double what we intended, but that was really interesting, and just to get a little insight as to what the TNA, as we fondly call it, do, and that people can have a look there. I mean, I know that the exhibition that's coming up is Treason, and I'm so looking forward to that. So there's going to be a lot on sort of gunpowder plot for starters. Certainly the kids would love that, and obviously other people, horrible things, executions and yucky William Wallace and things like that, that people can go and have a look in your exhibition. And there's no charge to go to the exhibition. You can park there. I think it's the R68 that goes to Kew. And you can just go in, have a cup of tea, something to eat maybe. You can have a look around the exhibition and then maybe buy a book on your way home. So, so do check it out, guys. And thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll hopefully have you back at some point to talk about it again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.